Metal struck concrete like a gunshot in the weapons training complex of the Joint Special Operations Tactical Academy. Major Oliver Silas, 6 feet 2 inches of Army Special Forces arrogance, ripped the M4 carbine from the hands of the small woman kneeling on the floor. "What are you doing here?" His voice echoed through the armory, where 4 other instructors had frozen mid-task. "This is a warrior's weapon, not a toy for nobodies like you." Raven Cassian, 5 feet 4 inches, 125 pounds in navy blue technician's coveralls, said nothing. She simply stood, hands still positioned, as if gripping the M4, index finger extended straight along an invisible trigger guard. The muscle memory was too perfect, too automatic. Master Sergeant Abel Forrester, a 60-year-old man with 30 years of Green Beret service, narrowed his eyes from the corner room. The way she stood, the way she breathed, the way her eyes scanned the exits in 0.5 seconds when Silas stepped closer. "Weapons room closes at 16:30 hours, Silas continued, his voice cold as steel. "Leave. Real operators need to prepare for tomorrow's live fire exercise." Behind him, Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Arden, Weapons Department head, laughed. "Careful, Silas. Don't let her touch the high-end equipment. Technicians only know how to clean, not how to understand combat systems." For a moment, Raven looked down at her hands, the hard calluses running along her palms, faded scars across her knuckles. And at her right wrist, half an inch of black tattoo peeking beneath her sleeve cuff. She quickly tugged the fabric down. But Abel had seen it, and in his mind, a question began to form. They called her Nobody. But in the next 20 minutes, the entire Joint Special Operations Tactical Academy would learn that some warriors don't need to speak, they only need to act. Raven gathered her cleaning supplies without a word, movements economical and precise. As she bent to retrieve a boar brush that had rolled under the workbench, her body moved with a fluidity that didn't match her supposed civilian background. She didn't crouch awkwardly. She dropped into a perfect tactical knee, weight balanced, head up, maintaining situational awareness even in this mundane moment. Abel noticed. The way an old wolf notices when another predator enters his territory. Silas was already turning back to his team, dismissing her existence entirely. "That's why women don't belong in combat roles," he said, loud enough for Raven to hear. "They don't have the instinct, the aggression, the capacity for violence that real warfare demands." Lieutenant Colonel Arden nodded, sliding a cleaning rod through a barrel. "Remember that female technician last week who damaged the optic sight on the SR-25? Cost us $3,000 because she didn't understand zero procedures. They're good for administrative work, but weapon systems require actual combat experience." Raven's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Her fingers wrapped around the handle of her equipment case with a grip that would have told an observant person she'd held something far more substantial than cleaning supplies. The webbing between her thumb and index finger showed the distinctive callus pattern of someone who'd fired tens of thousands of rounds, not someone who merely wiped down weapons in a climate-controlled armory. She walked toward the exit, her gait controlled and measured. But Abel saw what the others missed. She didn't just walk. She moved through space with the hyper-awareness of someone who'd operated in environments where a wrong step could trigger an IED or walk you into an ambush kill zone. Her head swiveled in micro-movements, processing angles and sight lines. Near the doorway, she paused for a fraction of a second, eyes tracking to the overhead light fixture, where dust patterns indicated recently disturbed airflow. Combat instinct checking for ceiling-mounted threats. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. "Good riddance," Silas muttered, returning to his M4 disassembly. "Now we can actually work without civilian interference." Outside in the corridor, Raven allowed herself one slow breath, the kind they taught in combat stress inoculation. 4 counts in. Hold for 4. 4 counts out. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered slightly, and for a split second her mind flashed to a different corridor, darker. Concrete walls riddled with bullet holes, the weight of 60 pounds of gear, the sound of her team's breathing through comms, the smell of cordite and fear. She shook her head, grounding herself in the present. That was 6 years ago. Different life, different person. A maintenance cart sat against the wall, and she methodically organized her cleaning supplies with the same precision she'd once used to arrange breaching charges. Everything in its place, Everything mission-ready, old habits carved deep. The corridor led to the main academic building, where evening classes were wrapping up. Through the windows, she could see instructors lecturing senior officers about advanced tactical concepts. Students in crisp uniforms taking notes on operations she'd actually executed. The irony wasn't lost on her. A group of students passed her in the hallway, their conversation animated about tomorrow's range qualification. Not one of them looked at her. To them, she was part of the infrastructure, as invisible as the walls or the floor tiles. She'd chosen this, wanted this, but some days the invisibility felt heavier than any ruck she'd ever carried. In the bathroom at the end of the hall, Raven stared at her reflection under harsh white light. 28 years old, but her eyes carried decades more. She pulled her sleeve up slightly, revealing more of the tattoo Silas's aggression had nearly exposed. The eagle, the anchor, the pistol, the trident, Navy SEAL insignia. Below it, words that made her throat tight. Neptune's spear, and beneath that, a date that changed history. A05.0211. She covered it quickly and returned to work. The student mess hall at 17:30 hours was organized chaos. 80-plus personnel moved through the serving line, a mix of students, instructors, and support staff. The room smelled like institutional food and military discipline. Raven took her position behind the serving counter, plastic gloves on, hair tied back, ready to dish out tonight's offering of baked chicken and roasted vegetables. The students treated her like furniture. The instructors treated her worse. Captain Charlotte Blaine arrived at the front of the line, the Marine Corps' first female raider instructor, 39 years old and carrying the weight of breaking barriers. She looked at Raven with barely concealed contempt. "Women like you make the rest of us look weak," Charlotte said, voice low but cutting. "We're out there proving ourselves in combat roles, and you're serving mashed potatoes. Do you understand what that does to perception? Every time a general sees a woman in a support role, it reinforces their assumptions about our limitations." Raven scooped chicken onto Charlotte's plate without responding. Her face remained neutral, but her grip on the serving spoon showed white knuckles. The irony of this moment, being lectured about female capability by someone who had no idea what Raven had sacrificed to prove exactly that, burned like acid. "Nothing to say?" Charlotte pressed. "That's the problem. Silent compliance. You should be fighting for more, demanding better positions, showing them women can do more than clean and serve." "Yes, ma'am," Raven said quietly, the military courtesy automatic, despite her civilian status. Charlotte moved on, shaking her head in disgust. 3 people later, Lieutenant Henry Blake stepped up, a 24-year-old SEAL student with an open face and genuine politeness that seemed out of place in this environment of competitive machismo. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, making eye contact, actually seeing her as a person. Raven felt something shift in her chest. One student out of 45 who treated support staff with basic human decency. She made a mental note. Character reveals itself in small moments when rank and recognition aren't watching. The evening rush continued. Raven moved through the motions with practiced efficiency, her mind cataloging details the way she'd once cataloged tactical environments. Exit routes, choke points, potential weapons within reach. The serving spoon could extend her striking range by 18 inches. The metal tray could be used as a shield or bludgeon. The steam table contained 170-degree water that could blind an attacker. She caught herself and forced the tactical assessment to stop. This wasn't Kandahar. This wasn't Syria. This was a mess hall in Virginia, where the only threat was emotional exhaustion and the slow erosion of her sense of purpose. Master Sergeant Liam Boyce appeared at the end of the line, 6 feet of physical intimidation wrapped in instructor authority. He'd been drinking, not drunk, but enough to amplify his natural aggression. He grabbed a tray with more force than necessary, the plastic cracking under his grip. "Move aside, civilian," he said, shouldering past another student to get to the food faster. Raven kept her eyes down, focusing on the green beans she was portioning. Liam took his food, but peased as he passed her station. He leaned in close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You know what I think when I see women like you," he said, voice low. "I think about all the real warriors who died because someone thought females could handle the physical demands of combat. You belong in an office, not anywhere near a military installation." He shoved past her, his shoulder hitting hers with deliberate force. The impact sent Raven stumbling backward, her hip colliding with the edge of the steam table. Pain flared hot and immediate, but her response was faster. In less than a second, her body had already begun the counter-movement, weight shifting, hand rising toward his exposed radial nerve, fingers positioned for a pressure point strike that would drop him to his knees before his nervous system could register the attack. The movements were pure reflex, carved into muscle memory by thousands of hours of close-quarters combat training. She stopped herself with visible effort, forced her hand to grab the edge of the counter instead, forced her breathing to remain steady, forced herself to stay in character as the timid technician who wouldn't fight back. But Liam was already moving away, oblivious to how close he'd come to being neutralized by someone he considered helpless. Dr. Sarah Anderson, the Academy psychologist, had witnessed the entire interaction from a nearby table. She set down her coffee and studied Raven with professional intensity. The controlled breathing, the micro-expressions of suppressed violence, the telltale signs of someone with serious combat training exercising extreme restraint. Sarah made a mental note to pull Raven's file in the morning. Something didn't add up. The mess hall slowly emptied as dinner ended. Raven cleaned the serving line with the same methodical precision she brought to everything. Wipe down surfaces, store food properly. Sanitize utensils. Each action deliberate and complete. No shortcuts, no half measures. The military had taught her that excellence in small things built the foundation for excellence in critical moments. By 1900 hours, she was alone in the serving area. She allowed herself to sit on a milk crate in the back, away from windows and sight lines. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump of suppressing her training. Every time someone got physical with her, her body screamed to respond with overwhelming force. The discipline required to appear weak, when you were anything but, was exhausting in ways civilians couldn't comprehend. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Iris. "You okay? Pentagon approved your evaluation clearance extension." Raven typed back with thumbs that had once assembled demolition charges in complete darkness. 3 more weeks, then I'm done. 3 more weeks of being invisible. 3 more weeks of collecting data on which students and instructors had the character to lead warriors versus which ones were just playing dress-up with rank insignia. 3 more weeks of serving food to people who thought she was nobody. She could survive 3 more weeks. She'd survived far worse. Before we continue with what happens next in that weapons room, I need you to do something. If you're feeling that frustration right now, that anger at watching someone talented being dismissed, don't just let it sit there. Channel it. Hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to show you what happens when the underestimated reveal who they really are. And trust me, the next 15 minutes will deliver a reversal so powerful, you'll want to watch it twice. The notification bell isn't optional. You'll want to know the instant Part 2 drops. Saturday morning arrived with the particular clarity that only comes at 0600 hours on a military installation. The firing range complex sprawled across 200 acres of carefully maintained terrain, featuring 8 ranges from 50 meters to 1,000 meters. Raven arrived early, as always, to set up paper targets for the day's qualification shoot. The work was simple, repetitive, exactly what she needed. She moved down Range 7, the 300-meter rifle course, stapling fresh targets to wooden frames. Each target went up straight and centered, her hands working with the efficiency of someone who understood that details mattered. A target that's off-center by 2 inches can throw off a student's zero and confidence for the entire exercise. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of gun oil and freshly cut grass. For a moment, Raven allowed herself to just exist in the simplicity of physical work. No life-or-death decisions, no teammates depending on her split-second choices. No classified operations that would haunt her sleep for years. Just targets and staples and the quiet satisfaction of preparation done right. Well, the cleaning lady knows how to use a staple gun. Raven turned to find Major Silas and his team approaching, range bags slung over shoulders, weapons cases in hand. The sun was behind them, casting long shadows that made them look larger than life. They looked like recruitment poster warriors, all confidence and capability, and the unquestioned assumption that they belonged in these spaces. Lieutenant Colonel Arden laughed at Silas's comment. "Careful, Silas. Complex machinery like a stapler might be beyond her qualifications. We should probably assign someone with actual technical knowledge." Raven finished hanging the last target without responding. She'd learned that silence often revealed more about others than any words she could offer. Their need to belittle her said everything about their insecurity masked as confidence. Do you even know how a rifle works? Silas pressed, moving closer. Or do you just clean them and hope for the best? I maintain them, sir, Raven replied, her tone respectful but empty of emotion. That's my job. Your job, Arden repeated mockingly. How noble. Maintaining the tools that real warriors use to protect this country while you collect a government paycheck for wiping down metal. The other students began arriving, 45 senior officers and enlisted personnel from across all special operations branches. Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Marine Raiders, Air Force Pararescue, Coast Guard Deployable Specialized Forces. The best of the best, assembled here to become even better. Master Sergeant Abel Forrester arrived with his customary early timing, setting up the Range Master Station with economical movements that spoke of decades doing exactly this. He nodded to Raven, a small gesture of acknowledgement that felt enormous in its rarity. The morning's exercise was long-range marksmanship fundamentals. Students would fire from the 300-meter line, focusing on position, breathing, and trigger control. Lieutenant Colonel Arden, as weapons department head, would demonstrate proper technique before students attempted qualification. Raven moved to the side, her job now to collect brass casings and maintain the range during live fire. Invisible work, necessary work, the kind of labor that elite warriors often forgot required doing. Arden positioned himself behind a rifle, adopting what he clearly believed was textbook prone position. But his elbow placement was off by 3 inches, creating instability in his platform. His breathing rhythm was irregular, causing micro-movements at the moment of trigger break. And his follow-through was non-existent. He was already moving before the bullet left the barrel. Raven saw it all in the first 5 seconds, saw the corrections he needed, saw the adjustments that would improve his accuracy by 30%. But she said nothing, just watched as he fired 5 rounds. 4 of the 5 missed center mass. The best shot was 4 inches left of the bullseye. Wind must be shifting, Arden announced, standing and brushing dirt off his uniform. Tricky conditions today. Remember that when you shoot, students. Real-world operations don't come with perfect weather. It wasn't the wind, it was technique. But Raven remained silent, collecting empty brass casings that clinked into her bucket, like small bells tolling for wasted potential. The students took turns firing. Some were excellent, years of training evident in every movement. Others struggled, frustrated by weapons that didn't perform the way they expected. Cadet Chloe Ryan, the first female Army Ranger candidate in this course, was clearly fighting her rifle. 3 shots in, and all 3 were low and right, a consistent pattern that indicated a specific technical issue. Raven watched Chloe's 4th shot, saw the problem immediately. Her trigger pull was jerking at the last moment, anticipating recoil instead of accepting it. A common issue, easily corrected, but Chloe's frustration was building with each miss. Raven moved closer, ostensibly to pick up brass near Chloe's position. As she passed, she spoke quietly, just loud enough for Chloe to hear. Slow your trigger press. Surprise yourself with the break. Chloe's head whipped around, surprise evident, but she nodded slightly and prepared for her 5th shot. This time, her finger moved with deliberate slowness, maintaining pressure until the rifle fired almost unexpectedly. The round punched dead center in the target. That's it! Abel called from the Range Master Station. Excellent shot, Cadet Ryan. Whatever you just changed, keep doing it. Silas had been watching. He stalked over to Raven, voice tight with barely controlled anger. Did you just give instruction to one of my students? No, sir, Raven said evenly. I was collecting brass. I heard you speak to her. You gave her technical advice. He moved into her personal space, using his physical size as intimidation. You think you know better than trained instructors? Better than Lieutenant Colonel Arden, who has 15 years of weapons expertise? Lieutenant Henry Blake stepped forward, his voice diplomatic but firm. Sir, if I may, she did help. My shot group tightened after hearing her advice about trigger control. Silas rounded on Henry. I don't care if your group tightened. She is support staff. She does not give tactical instruction. She doesn't have the qualifications, the training, or the authority. Is that clear? Yes, sir, Henry replied, but his eyes flickered to Raven with something that looked like respect. The morning continued with increasing tension. Raven felt the weight of observation from multiple angles. Abel was watching her with growing curiosity. Dr. Sarah Anderson had positioned herself near the range with a notebook, ostensibly observing student stress responses, but clearly focused on Raven more than anyone else. Even some students were stealing glances when they thought no one noticed. The invisibility she'd cultivated so carefully was beginning to crack. And cracks in cover were how operators got exposed, or killed. By mid-morning, the basic marksmanship rotation had finished. Master Sergeant Liam Boyce approached the firing line for the next demonstration. Combat reloads under stress. He set up multiple magazines, his movements practiced but inefficient. He was working harder than necessary, using muscle instead of technique. Combat reloads save lives, Liam announced to the gathered students. When you're in contact and your weapon runs dry, every tenth of a second matters. Watch this. He fired until the bolt locked back on an empty magazine, then executed his reload. It took him 2.8 seconds. Not terrible, but not excellent either. His hand movement was too large, creating wasted motion. His eyes came off target during the reload, eliminating situational awareness for nearly 3 full seconds. Raven had executed combat reloads in actual combat, under fire in Fallujah, during the Abbottabad raid when her primary magazine had taken a round and split, in Syria when 3 different weapon systems went down, and she'd rotated through her entire loadout while extracting Admiral Solomon from a collapsing building. Her average reload time under pressure was 1.2 seconds. Eyes never leaving the target. Muscle memory so ingrained she could do it in complete darkness or with injured hands. But here, now, she was nobody. Just the woman collecting brass casings, while real warriors demonstrated skills she'd mastered a decade ago. You know what separates elite operators from everyone else? The voice cut through the range noise with the smooth confidence of practiced sales pitch. Lieutenant Colonel Arden had paused the exercise to address the gathered students, but his words seemed directed at a broader audience. Professional-grade tactical communication systems, the kind that work in 120-degree heat and sub-zero operations. Military-spec tablets that handle classified briefings and real-time battlefield data. Night vision optics that turn darkness into an advantage. These aren't consumer products you find in stores. These are tools that special operations units actually deploy with. The difference between hobby-grade and professional-grade equipment, one saves lives, the other just looks cool on Instagram. Raven recognized the pitch for what it was, an advertisement woven into instruction. The Academy often partnered with defense contractors, allowing product placement in exchange for funding. She had seen similar pitches at DevGru, though there the equipment being promoted was usually legitimate cutting-edge technology, not commercial gear masquerading as tactical. The morning break arrived at 1000 hours. Students dispersed to the range house for coffee and bathroom breaks. Raven continued her work, moving methodically down the firing line with her collection bucket. The repetitive motion was almost meditative. Bend, pick up brass, drop it in bucket, move 3 feet, repeat. That was SEER Level 2 technique you advised earlier. Raven straightened to find Chief Warrant Officer Luke Fraser standing 5 feet away. The 40-year-old SEAL instructor had the weathered look of someone who had spent more time in combat zones than garrison. His eyes were sharp and assessing. "I don't know what you mean, sir," Raven replied, maintaining her cover. "The trigger control advice you gave Cadet Ryan, that's not something you learn from a manual or YouTube video. That's instructor-level knowledge from military marksmanship programs." Luke paused, studying her face for reaction. "I've been teaching shooting for 12 years. I know the difference between someone who's read about technique and someone who's applied it under pressure." Raven said nothing, which was itself an answer. "How long have you worked here?" Luke asked, shifting tactics. 3 months, sir." "And before that?" "Various maintenance positions, sir." "That's delightfully vague." Luke's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You know what's interesting? Your personnel file lists you as hired on a classified recommendation. That's unusual for an equipment technician. Usually those positions get filled through standard civil service applications." Raven's heartbeat remained steady through sheer force of will. This was the danger zone. When someone with actual operational experience started asking questions, cover stories could unravel quickly. The best defense was to give partial truths wrapped in misdirection. "I have some family connections to military contracting, sir. Sometimes recommendations come through informal channels." "Family connections," Luke repeated, clearly unconvinced. "Right. Well, your family connections taught you to move through a kill house like someone with CQB experience. I reviewed the security footage from yesterday when you reset targets inside. Your corner clearing technique was textbook room entry procedure. He'd been watching her, studying her. This was how cover got blown, not through dramatic confrontations, but through quiet observation by people who knew what to look for. I appreciate your concerns, sir, but I'm just here to maintain equipment and support the mission. Raven kept her voice neutral, giving him nothing to latch onto. Luke stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, keep your secrets, but secrets have a way of surfacing in environments like this. Just be careful. He walked away, leaving Raven with the uncomfortable certainty that her time operating in obscurity was running out. Multiple people were now questioning her background. Abel, Luke, Dr. Anderson. How long before someone ran a deeper check? How long before the classified seals on her military record got noticed by someone with enough clearance to peek behind them? The afternoon session moved to the tactical classroom inside the main academic building. Raven wasn't required to attend. Her maintenance work didn't extend to academic instruction, but she'd been asked to deliver cleaning supplies to the room, giving her a reason to be present during setup. The guest lecturer was Dr. Priscilla Flynn, a 45-year-old woman with steel gray hair and the particular confidence that came from surviving truly dangerous situations. Her bio listed her as a former intelligence analyst, which was civilian code for CIA Special Activities Division. Raven recognized the type, operators who'd left the life but couldn't quite leave behind the edge it carved into their personality. The lecture topic appeared on the projection screen: Case Studies in Modern JSOC Operations. Raven's stomach tightened. She knew where this was going before Dr. Flynn even opened her mouth. Today we're examining an operation that fundamentally changed counter-terrorism strategy, Dr. Flynn began, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who had given this talk many times. May 2nd, 2011, Abbottabad, Pakistan, Operation Neptune's Spear. The room fell silent. Every student knew this operation. It was legendary in special operations circles. The mission that killed Osama bin Laden, executed by SEAL Team 6 with precision that made it a case study in tactical excellence. Raven forced herself to remain still, to keep her breathing normal, to not react as Dr. Flynn pulled up satellite imagery of the compound. That compound. The place where everything had changed, where she'd breached the door to the third floor, where she had seen things that still played in her nightmares with perfect clarity. The assault force consisted of fewer than 30 operators, Dr. Flynn continued. They flew 160 miles into hostile territory, executed a precision raid against an unknown defensive configuration, and extracted within 40 minutes. 0 friendly casualties despite mechanical failure that left one helicopter inoperable. Raven's right hand unconsciously moved toward her left shoulder, where beneath her coveralls lay the tattoo commemorating that night. She caught herself and dropped her hand, but not before Abel Forrester noticed the movement from his position near the door. He was observing the students, but his attention kept flickering back to her with increasing frequency. The operation utilized specialized breaching equipment, Dr. Flynn explained, showing technical diagrams that were clearly sanitized versions of the actual charges used. Precision timing was critical. The breaching team had to gain entry within seconds while maintaining surprise and minimizing collateral risk. Raven remembered the weight of those charges, remembered calculating placement angles while helicopter rotors thundered overhead, remembered the explosive concussion that opened the door and the immediate flood of adrenaline as they moved into unknown threat space. A student raised his hand. How many operators were actually on the assault element? The exact number is still classified, right? Correct, Dr. Flynn confirmed. Fewer than 30 is all I can say publicly, but what's important isn't the number, it's what that small team accomplished through superior training, equipment, and courage under pressure. Courage. The word tasted like ash in Raven's memory. She hadn't felt courageous that night. She'd felt terrified and focused and alive in a way that civilian existence could never replicate. The mission had been the pinnacle of her operational career. It had also been the beginning of the end. Because after you've executed the most significant counterterrorism operation in modern history, what do you do for an encore? The breaching team's precision saved lives, Dr. Flynn continued, both friendly forces and non-combatants in the compound. That level of controlled violence, maximum effectiveness with minimum collateral damage, represents the gold standard of special operations. Raven's jaw clenched. Controlled violence. Such clinical language for the chaos and split-second decisions that determined who lived and who didn't. She'd made those decisions, lived with their consequences, carried their weight through 7 deployments until the weight became unbearable. The lecture continued for another 20 minutes, analyzing tactics and strategy with academic detachment. When it ended, students filed out discussing the operation with the reverent enthusiasm of people who had studied it but never lived it. They talked about the operators like mythical figures, not understanding that myths were just traumatized humans with above-average training trying to survive impossible situations. Raven waited until the room emptied before approaching to collect the trash bins. Dr. Flynn was packing her materials, but paused when she noticed Raven. "You're the equipment technician?" Dr. Flynn asked. "Yes, ma'am." "You were very still during my lecture. Most civilians find the combat details either exciting or disturbing. You seemed somewhere else." Raven met her eyes briefly. "It was informative, ma'am. I appreciate the historical context." Dr. Flynn studied her with the unsettling perception of someone trained to read people. Historical context. Interesting phrasing. Most people would say it was cool or intense. You sound like someone who understands the difference between operations as entertainment and operations as reality. "I work on a military installation, ma'am. You learn to respect the difference." "I suppose you do." Dr. Flynn closed her bag but didn't leave. "Can I ask you something, off the record?" Raven's internal alarm spiked. "Of course, ma'am. Have we met before? You seem familiar somehow." "I don't think so, ma'am. I would remember." Dr. Flynn tilted her head slightly. "I spent 15 years in environments where reading people meant the difference between successful operations and dead assets. And right now, every instinct I have is telling me you're more than you appear to be." Raven forced a small smile. "I appreciate the compliment, ma'am, but I'm really just here to empty trash and maintain equipment." "Right. Well, if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here through Friday as a guest lecturer. Sometimes it helps to talk with people who understand complicated backgrounds." She left without waiting for a response, leaving Raven alone in the classroom with the distinct impression that her cover was disintegrating faster than anticipated. Dr. Flynn had operational experience. She'd been trained to spot inconsistencies, and she'd clearly spotted something in Raven that didn't align with the maintenance technician's story. The afternoon dissolved into routine maintenance work. Raven cleaned weapons returned from the range, organized ammunition in the armory, and performed inventory counts with mechanical precision. The work kept her hands busy and her mind dangerously free to wander. By 1700 hours, she found herself in the basement storage room, cataloging surplus equipment. The quiet space felt like a small mercy after the day's multiple close calls. Down here, 3 levels below ground with concrete walls muffling all sound, she could breathe without the constant weight of maintaining her cover. Her phone buzzed, a text from Iris. "How much longer can you hold out? Your psych evals show increasing stress markers." Raven stared at the message. Her sister worked in Pentagon Special Projects, coordinating various classified programs, including the evaluation initiative that had placed Raven at JSOT. Iris had access to the biometric data Raven's fitness tracker collected. Heart rate variability, sleep patterns, stress indicators. The numbers apparently told a story Raven didn't want to acknowledge. She typed back, "I'm fine. 2 more weeks and the evaluation period ends. Your HRV has been in the red zone for 6 days straight. That's not fine. That's pre-breakdown physiology. I've operated under worse conditions. That was when you had a team and a mission. Now you're alone and pretending to be someone you're not. There's a difference." Raven set the phone down without responding. Iris meant well, but she didn't understand. Couldn't understand. The evaluation mission was the only thing giving Raven purpose since retirement. Without it, she was just another broken veteran trying to figure out how to exist in a world that moved too slowly and cared about things that felt meaningless after you'd operated at the edge of human capability. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Raven quickly composed herself, sliding her phone into her pocket and returning to the inventory clipboard. Security Chief Jasper Ronan appeared in the doorway, a 36-year-old former Delta Force operator who carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen real combat and didn't need to advertise it. "Working late," Jasper observed. It wasn't quite a question. "Inventory deadlines, sir. Quarterly reports due to the Commandant by Monday." "Right." Jasper leaned against the doorframe, studying her with the same unsettling perception that Luke and Dr. Flynn had shown. "Can I ask you something direct?" "Of course, sir." "What's your actual background?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Raven's mind raced through response options: denial, deflection, partial admission. The calculus of cover maintenance under direct questioning required instant assessment of the questioner's knowledge, authority, and likelihood of pursuing the matter. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir. My personnel file—" "Your personnel file is a masterpiece of bureaucratic vagueness," Jasper interrupted. "Hired on classified recommendation through standard civil service procedures with previous government contract experience. That's not information, that's camouflage. And I know camouflage when I see it because I spent 12 years using it." Raven said nothing, which Jasper seemed to take as confirmation. "Here's what I think," he continued, his voice dropping to a tone meant only for her. "I think you're here for reasons that have nothing to do with maintaining equipment. I think someone with significant authority placed you here for purposes I'm not cleared to know. And I think the increasingly aggressive treatment you're receiving from instructors is part of whatever evaluation or operation you're conducting." He was sharper than she'd anticipated. Most security chiefs were competent at physical security, but lacked the analytical depth to piece together operational patterns. Jasper was different. Delta Force selection filtered for intelligence as much as physical capability. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but—" "I'm not concerned," Jasper cut in. "I'm offering professional courtesy. If you're running an op, I won't interfere. But I also won't let things escalate to a point where someone gets hurt. So, if the situation is becoming unmanageable, I need to know." Raven met his eyes, making a split-second decision to give him enough truth to satisfy his operational instincts without blowing her cover completely. "I'm not in danger, sir, but I appreciate you keeping situational awareness. If things change, you'll be the first to know." Jasper held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, whatever you're doing here, I hope it's worth the cost you're paying. Because I've seen that look before, the one you're wearing right now. It's the look operators get when they've been undercover too long, and the person they're pretending to be starts feeling more real than who they actually are." He left without waiting for a response, his footsteps fading up the stairs. Raven stood alone in the basement, surrounded by surplus equipment and the echo of words that cut too close to truth. She'd been undercover for 3 months. 90 days of swallowing insults, accepting dismissal, and watching people reveal their true character when they thought no one important was watching. 90 days of evaluating which students had the integrity to lead warriors and which ones were just ambitious officers playing tactical dress-up. The mission was nearly complete. Her evaluation reports had already identified 12 individuals who should never receive security clearances high enough for JSOC operations. People like Silas, who confused cruelty with strength, like Arden, who valued technical knowledge over human decency, like Liam, who used physical intimidation to mask professional inadequacy. But Jasper was right about the cost. Every day she spent invisible, she felt pieces of her actual identity slipping away. The warrior who'd breached bin Laden's compound felt like a stranger. The SEAL who had saved an admiral's life felt like a story she'd heard, not lived. The woman who had earned a Navy Cross felt like a myth. Who was she becoming in this basement? Counting surplus boots while elite students trained for missions she used to execute? The question haunted her as she finished inventory and climbed back to ground level, re-entering the world where she was nobody worth noticing. If you're starting to suspect Raven isn't who she appears to be, you're paying attention. But here's the thing, what's coming is bigger than you think. Smash that like button if you appreciate stories where skill speaks louder than rank. Drop a comment with your theory about her background. Are you Team SEAL, Delta, or something else entirely? Sunday morning brought unexpected chaos to the usually structured academy schedule. A scheduling conflict had pushed a major exercise forward. The Kill House close quarters battle training that was supposed to happen next week had been moved to today due to facility conflicts. The 16-room tactical training facility was the academy's crown jewel, a configurable space designed to replicate everything from hostage rescue scenarios to high-risk warrant service. Raven's role was simple: reset the target systems between student runs. Enter the kill house after each team cleared it, replace the electronic target sensors, adjust furniture to create different room configurations, and basically ensure the facility was ready for continuous training rotation. It was tedious work, It was also work that required her to move through 16 rooms of tactical space, using techniques she'd mastered years ago, but was supposed to have never learned. The first student team finished their run at 0800 hours. Lieutenant Colonel Arden's voice came through the facility speakers. "Technician Cassian, you're clear to enter for reset. You have 10 minutes. Raven keyed the external mic. "Copy. Entering now." She pushed through the entry door into the first room, a simulated living area with furniture, doors, windows, and electronic targets that would pop up during training runs. The room smelled like cordite residue and the particular combination of sweat and stress that came from high-intensity training. Her body moved before her mind fully engaged, scanning corners, checking angles, clearing visual dead space. She caught herself mid-motion and forced her movements back to civilian uncertainty, but the damage was done. Anyone watching the security cameras would have seen the first 3 seconds of pure operator movement before she'd consciously resumed her cover. In the observation room above, Luke Fraser had indeed been watching. He rewound the footage and watched again. The way Raven entered that first room wasn't how civilians moved. It wasn't even how most soldiers moved. It was how special operations personnel moved after thousands of hours training in similar facilities. "Abel," Luke called to Master Sergeant Forrester, who was reviewing training scores nearby. "Come look at this." Abel moved to the monitor as Luke replayed the footage a third time. "Watch her entry," Luke said, pointing at the screen. "She's pieing the corner. Proper angles, proper spacing, proper rhythm. That's not something you pick up from watching movies. That's trained response." Abel leaned closer, his weathered face thoughtful. "Play it again." They watched Raven move through the first room, ostensibly just repositioning furniture and targets. But her path through the space traced perfect tactical movement patterns. She never turned her back to uncleared areas. She maintained standoff distance from potential threat positions. Her head movement showed systematic scanning rather than random looking around. "She's clearing the room," Abel said quietly. "She's doing reset work, but she's moving like someone running a tactical exercise." "Question is," Luke replied, "where did an equipment technician learn close-quarters battle techniques at that level of competency?" Maybe she didn't learn them as an equipment technician. The two instructors exchanged a look that carried the weight of operational experience and the growing certainty that Raven Cassian was not who her personnel file claimed. Below, unaware of the scrutiny, Raven completed the reset and exited the kill house. Her heart was racing, not from exertion, but from the realization that she'd let muscle memory override conscious control. She'd made a mistake. In the special operations world, mistakes got people killed. In the undercover evaluation world, mistakes got operations compromised. She needed to be more careful. 2 more weeks. She could maintain cover for 2 more weeks. The day progressed with increasing tension she couldn't quite identify. Students rotated through the kill house. Instructors demonstrated techniques. Raven reset targets and rearranged furniture, and tried desperately to move like someone who'd never been trained in the very skills being taught around her. By mid-afternoon, the physical exhaustion of maintaining false incompetence was wearing her down. She took a break in the armory storage room, sitting on an ammunition crate and allowing herself to just breathe without performing. The door opened. Captain Charlotte Blaine entered, looking for spare magazines for the afternoon's pistol training. She noticed Raven and her expression hardened. "Still hiding in storage rooms?" Charlotte said, her voice sharp with contempt. "Must be nice. No pressure, no expectations, no one judging whether you're good enough to wear the uniform." Raven stood, giving Charlotte space to access the magazine bins. "Just taking a break, ma'am?" "A break, right." Charlotte grabbed 2 magazine pouches with more force than necessary. "You want to know what makes me angry? It's not that you're content with a support role, it's that you're wasting potential. You clearly know more than you let on. I've watched you, the way you handle weapons, the knowledge you have. You could be more than this if you just tried." The irony of the moment was almost unbearable. Charlotte, who had fought her entire career to be taken seriously as a female warrior, was lecturing Raven about wasted potential. Neither woman knew the other's full story. Charlotte didn't know Raven had already achieved everything Charlotte was fighting to prove women could do. Raven didn't know Charlotte's journey had included discrimination and harassment that made Jay Soday's casual dismissiveness seem mild. "I appreciate your concern, ma'am," Raven said quietly, "but I'm content with my current position." "Content." Charlotte practically spat the word. "That's exactly the problem. Women like you being content with less makes it harder for women like me to demand more. Every time a general sees a female support staff member, it reinforces assumptions about where women belong in the military structure. Ma'am, with respect, maybe where women belong is wherever they choose to be, whether that's infantry or logistics or administration or special operations. Charlotte froze, her eyes narrowing. Special operations? Interesting example for an equipment technician to choose. Raven cursed internally. Operational security required consistent vocabulary. Civilians talked about combat or combat roles. Using the specific phrase special operations revealed familiarity with military organizational structure that didn't align with her cover. I work on a military installation, ma'am, Raven said, trying to recover. I hear the terminology. Right, you hear things. Charlotte studied her with new intensity. What else do you hear about special operations? Nothing, ma'am. Just what everyone knows from news and such. Charlotte took a step closer. You're lying. I don't know what about, but you're definitely lying. Your word choice is too precise. Your bearing is too controlled. You move like someone with training, serious training, even when you're trying to look casual. This was spiraling beyond recovery. Charlotte's competitive nature and professional paranoia were combining into an investigative focus that threatened everything. If a Marine Raider instructor started seriously questioning Raven's background, it would trigger official inquiries that might reveal the classified evaluation program. Ma'am, I'm just a technician trying to do my job without causing problems. I apologize if I've said anything. Stop. Charlotte held up a hand. Stop with the humble civilian act. I've been around operators long enough to recognize one. I don't know your story, but I know performance when I see it. And you're performing. She left before Raven could respond, leaving her alone with the sick certainty that her cover was no longer viable. Too many people asking too many questions. Too many small mistakes compounding into a pattern that trained observers could recognize. Her phone buzzed. Iris again. Pentagon flagged your vitals. Your cortisol levels are approaching operational stress threshold. Do you need extraction? Extraction. The word almost made Raven laugh. You didn't extract from evaluation operations. You completed the mission, or you failed. And Raven Cassian had never failed a mission in her life, combat or otherwise. She typed back, I'm fine. 13 days left. But she wasn't fine. The accumulated stress of 3 months undercover, combined with the increasing scrutiny from multiple trained observers, was pushing her toward an operational breaking point. And breaking points in the special operations world had consequences that ended careers at best and lives at worst. The evening mess hall service felt like wading through concrete. Every smile at a student who ignored her existence. Every yes sir to an instructor who treated her like furniture. Every moment of swallowing the truth of who she was while pretending to be someone insignificant. Master Sergeant Liam Boyce arrived at the serving line already halfway drunk. The academy had strict policies against alcohol consumption during training weeks, but Liam apparently considered himself above such restrictions. He grabbed a tray and shoved his way to the front of the line, displacing a junior student who wisely chose not to object. Move aside, civilian, Liam said, his voice carrying the particular aggression of someone who had found courage in a bottle. Real warriors eat first. Raven served him chicken and vegetables without comment. Liam took his plate but paused, swaying slightly, his alcohol-fogged brain processing something he had apparently been thinking about all day. You know what your problem is? He said, loud enough for nearby students to hear. You think you belong here, think you're part of something important, but you're not. You're just the help. You're the person we tolerate because someone needs to clean our weapons and serve our food. You'll never be anything more than that. The mess hall had gone quiet. 80-plus personnel watching to see how Raven would respond to this public humiliation. She set down her serving spoon carefully, looked Liam directly in the eyes, and spoke with a calm that came from places he couldn't imagine. You're right, Master Sergeant. I'm just here to serve. Will there be anything else? Liam's face flushed red. Her refusal to engage, to fight back, somehow made him angrier than opposition would have. That's it? That's all you've got? No self-respect? No pride? I have both, Master Sergeant. I just don't need to prove them to you. Something in her tone, the absolute certainty beneath the respectful words, cut through Liam's alcohol haze. For a second, he looked confused, like he'd glimpsed something that didn't fit his understanding of who she was. Then his hand lashed out, shoving her backward with enough force to send her stumbling into the steam table behind her. Pain exploded across her lower back as she collided with the metal edge, and her body responded before her mind could override it. Pure muscle memory. Thousands of hours of training activating in milliseconds. Her weight shifted, redistributing for optimal counterattack positioning. Her right hand rose toward his exposed radial nerve, fingers already configured for the pressure point strike that would drop him instantly. Her left foot slid back into a stable fighting stance that would give her leverage for the follow-through, that would pin him to the floor in complete control. She stopped herself with visible effort that several people noticed, forced her hands to grab the counter edge instead, forced her breathing to remain steady through the spike of adrenaline, forced herself to stay in character even though every cell in her body screamed to respond with overwhelming force. But the damage was partial. Her initial movement, that first half second of trained response, had been witnessed. Sarah Anderson, sitting at a nearby table with her ever-present notebook, had seen it. Jasper Ronan, making his evening security rounds, had seen it. And Lieutenant Henry Blake, the SEAL student who had consistently shown Raven respect, had definitely seen it. Liam was oblivious, already turning away with a satisfied sneer at having put the civilian in her place. But others had seen Raven's nearly imperceptible slip into combat mode, had seen the controlled violence that she'd barely contained. The meal service continued, but the energy in the room had shifted. Conversations were quieter, more speculative. Raven could feel the weight of observation from multiple directions. Her cover was disintegrating in real time, death by 1,000 small reveals. After cleanup, she escaped to the janitor's closet on the 3rd floor of the main academic building, a small space that had become her refuge during the evaluation period. She sat on an overturned bucket, hands shaking now that she was alone, and allowed herself to feel the full weight of how close she'd come to exposing everything. 3 more months of accumulating aggression and dismissal, 3 months of being invisible and insignificant, 3 months of watching people reveal their character when they thought no one important was watching. And in one moment of reflexive response to physical aggression, she'd almost destroyed the entire operation. Her phone buzzed. Not Iris this time. A number she recognized but hadn't expected to see. Admiral Solomon's personal line. She answered. "Yes, sir?" "Petty Officer Cassian." His voice carried the weight of command and concern. "I've been monitoring your evaluation metrics. We need to talk about your extraction timeline. Sir, I have 13 days remaining in the operational window. I know the timeline. I'm questioning whether you can maintain cover that long. Your stress indicators are approaching critical levels, and I have received reports from multiple sources that your cover may be compromised. Sir, I can complete the mission. This isn't about capability, Petty Officer. It's about wisdom. You're operating in a pressure cooker environment with your identity nearly exposed and your psychological reserves depleted. That's how good operators make fatal mistakes." Raven closed her eyes, fighting the wave of emotion that threatened to break through her control. "Sir, if I extract now, the evaluation is incomplete. We won't have full data on several candidates, including some of the most problematic instructors. The mission will have failed. The mission succeeded the moment you identified 12 individuals who shouldn't hold JSOC clearances," Admiral Solomon replied. "Everything else is gravy. Don't sacrifice your mental health for completeness that isn't necessary." "With respect, sir, mental health is a luxury for peacetime. This is still an operation." There was a long pause. When the Admiral spoke again, his voice carried the particular tone of someone who understood exactly what Raven was experiencing because he'd lived it himself. "Petty Officer, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me 20 years ago. Operations end. Missions complete. But who you are when it's over, that's what you carry for the rest of your life. Don't lose yourself trying to prove something to people who will never understand your sacrifice." "I'm not trying to prove anything, sir." "Aren't you? You retired because you couldn't carry the weight anymore. PTSD, survivor's guilt, Yemen still playing in your head every night. And instead of healing, you volunteered for an undercover operation that forces you to hide everything you are. That's not recovery. That's punishment." The words landed like a physical blow. Raven had never articulated it that way, but the truth of it was undeniable. This evaluation mission wasn't about serving the greater good. It was about punishing herself for being the one who survived when 4 teammates didn't, about proving she could still be useful, even though she was too broken for operational deployment. "Sir, I need to finish this." then finish it, but in 13 days, not a day longer. And Raven? The Admiral's use of her first name carried weight. When this is done, you're taking 30 days of mandatory counseling. No arguments, no excuses. That's an order. Yes, sir. She ended the call and sat in darkness, surrounded by cleaning supplies and the ghost of who she used to be. Tomorrow would bring the live fire exercise, the culmination of the week's training, and based on her dwindling cover and the increasing number of people asking questions, possibly the event that would finally expose everything. She just needed to survive 13 more days. The question was whether her cover or her sanity would last that long. Morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The live fire exercise was scheduled for 0900 hours on the main training ground, a 40-acre complex designed to simulate urban combat environments. Raven reported early, as always, tasked with setting up safety equipment, engineering, and checking communications systems before students arrived. The training grounds sprawled before her in the gray dawn light, concrete structures mimicking buildings, earthen berms providing cover and concealment, target systems configured to pop up at random intervals. It was the closest thing to actual combat conditions you could create in a training environment, and it attracted the kind of aggressive energy that made mistakes more likely. Chief Warrant Officer Luke Fraser was already present, reviewing the exercise plan with Master Sergeant Abel Forrester. They both looked up as Raven approached, their expressions carrying a new quality she couldn't quite identify. Not hostility, something closer to curiosity mixed with wariness. Cassian, Luke said, using her last name with the familiarity of military culture. Communications check on the safety radios. We've got 45 students running live ammunition drills. I need confirmation every radio is functioning before we go hot. Yes, sir. Raven collected the radios from the equipment trailer, testing each one with practiced efficiency. The work was simple but critical. In live fire training, communication failures could mean friendly fire incidents. She treated each radio check with the same attention to detail she'd once given to pre-mission equipment inspections where failure meant death. Students began arriving at 0830 hours, their energy running high with pre-exercise adrenaline. Major Silas led his group, already loudly critiquing the exercise setup, despite not having reviewed the actual plan. Lieutenant Colonel Arden was demonstrating rifle manipulation techniques that were technically correct but tactically questionable. Captain Charlotte Blaine moved with tense efficiency, her eyes tracking to Raven with the same suspicious intensity she'd shown yesterday. The exercise brief began at 0845 hours. Colonel Naomi Hughes, the Academy Commandant, addressed the assembled students with the crisp authority of someone who'd commanded at every level of military structure. Today's training simulates a high-risk compound clearance, Commandant Hughes explained. You'll move as 4-person teams through urban terrain under simulated enemy fire. Safety is paramount. All personnel will maintain awareness of your teammates' positions at all times. Support staff, her eyes flickered to Raven, will be positioned in the observation tower. Any questions? Lieutenant Henry Blake raised his hand. Ma'am, what's the success metric? Speed or accuracy? Both, Lieutenant. Real operations don't allow you to choose. You move fast enough to maintain momentum and accurate enough to distinguish threats from non-combatants. That's the standard. The brief continued with technical details about boundaries, safety protocols, and medical support positioning. Raven absorbed it all. While ostensibly organizing safety equipment, her mind automatically processing tactical information the way she'd done for 7 deployments. The exercise design was solid but predictable. She could see 3 obvious approaches that would optimize success, and 2 significant vulnerabilities in the safety plan that could lead to accidents if students made poor decisions under pressure. She kept these observations to herself. Equipment technicians didn't offer tactical analysis. By 0900 hours, the first team was positioned at the start line. Raven climbed to the observation tower as directed, a 20-foot elevated platform providing oversight of the entire training ground. From here, she could see everything, every movement, every decision, every moment where character revealed itself under stress. The exercise began with the crack of blank fire and the controlled chaos of students moving through simulated combat. The first team performed adequately, not exceptional, but competent enough to complete the objective without safety violations. The second team was better, demonstrating coordination that came from genuine trust rather than forced cooperation. The third team included Lieutenant Henry Blake, and Raven found herself watching with particular attention. Henry moved with the careful precision of someone who understood that speed without control was just recklessness with extra steps. He cleared corners properly, maintained awareness of his teammates, made decisions that prioritized mission success over personal glory. This was why she was here, to identify people like Henry who had the character to lead warriors, and to identify people like Silas who confused aggression with leadership. The morning progressed with team after team executing the exercise, some impressive, some adequate, some revealing critical gaps that would need correction before these officers led real troops in actual combat. At 1100 hours, a scheduled break allowed students to refuel and instructors to adjust the exercise parameters for the afternoon session. Raven descended from the observation tower, her role now shifting to reset targets and repair any equipment damage during the morning's training. She was checking a malfunctioning target sensor when the voice cut through the relative quiet. Military service teaches you one thing civilians rarely understand. Preparation isn't paranoia, it's survival. Raven looked up to find Lieutenant Colonel Arden addressing a small group of students who had gathered near the equipment trailer. His voice carried the practiced cadence of someone delivering a sales pitch disguised as tactical wisdom. That's why specialized insurance programs exist for high-risk professionals, coverage that understands deployment cycles, combat zones, and classified work. Investment strategies designed for people who can't touch their accounts for months at a time. Financial planning that accounts for security clearances and non-disclosure agreements. Traditional financial advisors don't get this world, but specialized services that work exclusively with defense contractors, intelligence professionals, and special operations personnel, they speak the language. They understand the stakes. Several students nodded thoughtfully, clearly receptive to the pitch. Raven recognized it for what it was, another advertisement woven into instruction, this time for financial services that probably charged premium rates for specialized knowledge that any competent advisor could provide. But the students didn't know better. They heard an authority figure validating their sense of being special, and they bought in. The afternoon session resumed at 1300 hours, with a modified exercise designed to increase complexity. Teams would now face time pressure, additional objectives, and simulated casualties that required tactical adaptation. The stress level ramped up noticeably, and with it came the increased likelihood of mistakes. Raven returned to the observation tower, watching as the afternoon teams tackled the harder scenarios. The increased difficulty revealed character with brutal clarity. Some students rose to the challenge, demonstrating leadership and composure under pressure. Others fractured, their carefully constructed competence dissolving when conditions exceeded their training. At 1400 hours, the afternoon break coincided with Colonel Carl Edwin's arrival on the training ground. The deputy commandant had been in meetings all morning, but wanted to observe the final exercise rotations. He climbed to the observation tower, where Raven was recording equipment status on her clipboard. "Technician," he said, barely glancing at her. "Status of communications systems?" "All functioning normally, sir. No equipment failures reported." "Good. I need this space." "You can monitor from ground level." Raven gathered her equipment without comment and descended, well practiced in making herself invisible, when authority figures decided they needed the space she occupied. She positioned herself near the medical support station, where she could still observe while staying out of the way. Dr. Sarah Anderson was staffing the medical station, her psychologist credentials making her qualified for basic first aid supervision, even though the academy had actual combat medics on standby. She noticed Raven and gestured her over. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said quietly, her tone carrying professional concern rather than casual curiosity. "Of course, ma'am. How are you holding up? And please don't give me the standard 'I'm fine' response. I've been watching you for 3 months, and your stress indicators have been climbing steadily." Raven kept her expression neutral. "I appreciate your concern, ma'am, but I'm managing well." "Are you?" Sarah pulled out her ever-present notebook, flipping to a page filled with observations. Increased isolation during breaks, hypervigilance in public spaces, controlled breathing patterns consistent with anxiety management techniques. And yesterday in the mess hall, your physical response to Master Sergeant Boyce's aggression showed training that doesn't align with your supposed background. This was dangerous territory. Psychologists were trained to see patterns that others missed. Sarah had been observing, documenting, building a case that Raven's cover story didn't hold up under scrutiny. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating observation. You move like someone with significant combat training. You respond to stress with techniques taught in military resilience programs. And you carry yourself with the particular awareness that comes from operating in genuinely dangerous environments." Sarah paused, studying Raven's face. "I think you're here for reasons that have nothing to do with equipment maintenance. And I think whatever you're actually doing is taking a serious psychological toll." Before Raven could respond, shouts erupted from the training ground. Both women turned to see a student team in trouble. Someone had moved into a crossfire zone between two active firing positions. The safety protocols should have prevented this, but in the chaos of the exercise, a breakdown in communication had created a dangerous situation. Raven's body moved before conscious thought engaged. She sprinted from the medical station, covering 100 meters in 14 seconds, her mind automatically calculating angles and timing. The student in danger was Lieutenant Henry Blake, who'd moved to retrieve a simulated casualty and hadn't realized two other teams were about to initiate crossing fire patterns that would put him directly in between. The blank rounds wouldn't kill him, but at close range, they could cause serious injury. And beyond the physical danger, the psychological impact of being caught in a crossfire, even a training one, could be traumatic for young officers. Raven hit Henry in a full-speed tackle that sent both of them rolling across the dirt as blank rounds cracked overhead. The impact was hard enough to tear fabric and knock the wind from both of them. They came to rest behind a concrete barrier just as the crossing fire reached its peak intensity. For 3 seconds, they lay there breathing hard, the sound of blank fire creating a pocket of violence around their position. Then silence fell, as the exercise safety officer called an immediate halt. Raven pushed herself up, immediately checking Henry for injuries. "You okay?" "Yeah," Henry gasped, his eyes wide with the adrenaline surge of a near miss. You saved me. That would have been bad." Raven stood, offering him a hand up, and that's when she felt the tear. Her uniform shirt had ripped at the shoulder seam during the tackle and roll. The fabric hung loose, exposing her right shoulder and upper chest area. And with it, the tattoo she'd kept hidden for 3 months. The black Navy SEAL trident stood out in sharp contrast against her skin. Below it, the words Neptune's Spear in precise military lettering, and beneath that, the date that changed counterterrorism history. 05/02/11. Lieutenant Colonel Arden was the first to notice. "What the hell is that?" We're 60 seconds from the reveal that changes everything. But first, have you subscribed? Because what's about to happen will answer every question you've been asking. The pieces are all there. The tattoo, the stance, the knowledge. It's all about to connect. Students and instructors converged on their position. Raven's hand instinctively moved to cover the exposed tattoo, but it was too late. Too many people had seen. Too many phone cameras were already out, recording what they assumed was stolen valor or a tasteless fake. Major Silas pushed through the crowd, his face red with indignation. "That tattoo is classified iconography. Where did you get it? Did you buy it off some website? Do you have any idea how disrespectful that is to actual SEAL operators?" Raven backed against the concrete barrier, her breathing accelerating, not from exertion, but from the PTSD triggers firing in rapid succession. Too many people, too close, loud voices, aggressive energy. Her mind flashed to other moments of being surrounded: Fallujah, Kandahar, Aleppo, places where being surrounded meant you were about to die. "Answer me," Silas shouted, moving closer. "Is that tattoo real or fake?" "It's real," Raven heard herself say, the words coming from somewhere beyond conscious control. "It's real because I was there. May 2nd, 2011, Abbottabad. I breached the 3rd floor door." The statement landed like a physical force. Complete silence descended over the training ground as 80-plus personnel processed what she'd just said. The absurdity of it, the impossibility of it, the equipment technician claiming to have been part of the most famous special operations raid in modern history. Lieutenant Colonel Arden laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible. That operation was SEAL Team 6. DevGru, you're a civilian technician. You expect us to believe?" The sound of a vehicle approaching cut through his words. A staff car rolled onto the training ground, an unscheduled arrival that immediately drew attention. The vehicle stopped 30 feet from the gathered crowd, and the rear door opened. Admiral James Solomon stepped out. 52 years old, decorated career spanning 3 decades, currently serving as JSOC Deputy Commander. His presence at JSOTA was unusual, but not unprecedented. Senior officers occasionally visited for inspections or guest lectures. But his timing, arriving at this exact moment, felt like something more than coincidence. The Admiral's aide moved to intercept him, probably to brief him on the situation, but Solomon waved him off. He walked toward the crowd with the measured pace of someone who'd commanded in every environment from boardrooms to combat zones. His eyes scanned the assembled personnel, taking in the scene with practiced assessment. Then his gaze locked on Raven. For 3 full seconds, nothing moved. The Admiral's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, recognition, concern, and something that looked like profound respect. His eyes tracked to the exposed tattoo on her shoulder, to the date that he knew as well as his own birthday, to the woman he'd last seen in a very different context. Then Admiral James Solomon came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute. His voice carried across the silent training ground with absolute clarity. Petty Officer First Class Cassian, Neptune's Spear, Devgru. The world stopped. Raven's body moved on pure instinct, straightening to attention, returning the salute with the precision of someone who'd done it thousands of times. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't suppress, her throat tight with emotion she'd suppressed for 3 months. "Sir," she managed to whisper. The Admiral held the salute for the full count of 3, longer than regulation, making it clear this was recognition, not just protocol. When he finally dropped his hand, he took 2 steps closer, his voice softer but still audible. "Syria, December 2017, Aleppo extraction. You carried me 3 kilometers with a bullet in your shoulder. You saved my life when any rational person would have left me and saved themselves." Behind them, the crowd remained frozen in shock. Major Silas's face had drained of all color. Lieutenant Colonel Arden stood with his mouth open, unable to process what he was witnessing. Captain Charlotte Blaine had tears streaming down her face, her hand over her mouth in horror at how she'd treated a woman who'd done what Charlotte was still fighting to prove was possible. "I put you in for the Navy Cross," Admiral Solomon continued. "They classified it because acknowledging female operators at Devgru was still politically sensitive. But I never forgot. None of us did." Commandant Colonel Naomi Hughes had been in her office when the commotion started. She arrived now, slightly out of breath, carrying a classified file folder that she'd apparently grabbed before rushing to the training ground. She stood beside the Admiral, her face grave as she opened the folder. "Her DD-214 is redacted," Naomi read aloud, her voice carrying the weight of official documentation. "But with Admiral Solomon's presence, I've been authorized to share relevant portions. Beads, Class 285, graduated December 2009, Devguru assignment, January 2010. 7 combat deployments across Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, and Yemen. Operation Neptune's Spear, confirmed participant. 2 Bronze Stars with Valor device. 1 Navy Cross, classified. Retired, June 2018, with full honors." She looked up from the file, her expression showing both respect and controlled anger. "Current assignment, Pentagon Special Projects Division. Evaluation role, assessing leadership character and security clearance. Suitability of JSODS students and instructors for Joint Special Operations Command selection." The implications crashed over the crowd like a physical wave. Raven hadn't been maintaining equipment, she'd been evaluating them. Every interaction, every moment of disrespect, every casual dismissal, all of it had been documented and reported to Pentagon officials who made career-defining decisions about security clearances and special operations assignments. Master Sergeant Liam Boyce, who had shoved her in the mess hall, looked like he might be sick. He'd physically assaulted someone who held authority to end his career with a single negative evaluation. The irony was almost too perfect. "I want every instructor who interacted with Petty Officer Cassian in my office immediately," Commandant Hughes said, her voice carrying steel. "Major Silas, Lieutenant Colonel Arden, Captain Blaine, Master Sergeant Boyce, Colonel Edwin, now." Lieutenant Henry Blake stood nearby, still processing everything. He'd been the one consistent student who'd treated Raven with basic respect and dignity. Now he understood why his personnel file would probably carry a note about exemplary character and leadership potential. Small kindnesses had enormous consequences. The crowd began to disperse under Abel Forrester's direction, students moving away in shocked, small groups, their conversations animated with the magnitude of what they'd witnessed. Several students approached Raven with something between awe and apology, but she waved them off gently. She wasn't ready for hero worship or redemption narratives. She was barely holding herself together. Admiral Solomon remained, giving Raven space, but staying close enough to provide support if needed. When the immediate chaos cleared, he spoke quietly. "How long were you planning to maintain cover?" 13 more days, sir. Complete the evaluation cycle." "Not happening. You're done. This mission is complete as of now. We have more than enough data from your 3 months of observation." He paused, studying her face with concern. "And you need to decompress. This kind of extended undercover work does psychological damage, especially when it requires you to hide everything you are." Raven wanted to argue, but the exhaustion hit her like a physical weight. 3 months of invisible existence. 3 months of swallowing disrespect and pretending incompetence. 3 months of watching her identity dissolve while everyone around her assumed she was nobody worth noticing. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. Dr. Sarah Anderson approached, her professional demeanor softened with genuine compassion. "I'd like to schedule some sessions with you, if you're willing. Processing this kind of experience requires professional support, and I have relevant clearances for classified work discussions." "Thank you, ma'am. I'd appreciate that." The afternoon dissolved into administrative chaos. Commandant Hughes conducted emergency meetings with the instructors who'd been most aggressive toward Raven. Security Chief Jasper Ronan coordinated with Pentagon officials about adjusting security protocols now that Raven's cover was blown. Students whispered among themselves, reconstructing every interaction with her through the new lens of understanding who she actually was. By 1700 hours, Raven found herself in a conference room with Admiral Solomon, Commandant Hughes, and a secure video connection to Pentagon officials. The debrief covered her evaluation findings, the students she'd flagged for security concerns, and the systemic issues she'd identified in how Jay Sode addressed character assessment versus technical competence. "Your evaluation identified 12 individuals who should not receive TSL or CI clearances necessary for JSOC operations," said the Pentagon official on screen, a 2-star general whose name Raven couldn't see from her angle. "Your reports documented patterns of character deficiency masked by tactical competence. This is exactly the kind of evaluation we needed." Admiral Solomon leaned forward. "What happens to those 12 individuals? Quietly reassigned, their careers continue, but they'll never hold positions requiring the kind of trust that special operations demand. Major Silas, for example, will find himself in administrative roles for the remainder of his service. Lieutenant Colonel Arden will be passed over for promotion. The others will face similar career adjustments without public explanation." It wasn't dramatic justice. It was bureaucratic consequence, the kind that ended ambitions quietly and permanently. In some ways, it was more final than court-martial or public disgrace. These officers would simply never reach the positions they'd expected, never lead the warriors they'd imagined commanding, never understand that their failure came for character deficiencies revealed to a woman they'd dismissed as nobody. When your career involves classified operations and security clearances, standard legal advice doesn't cut it. The voice came from the conference room doorway where Lieutenant Colonel Arden stood, clearly waiting for his disciplinary meeting, but his words seemed directed at the students gathered in the hallway beyond. "You need attorneys who understand UCMJ, non-disclosure agreements, and the complexities of transitioning from active duty to civilian contracting. Educational programs that offer accredited degrees while respecting deployment schedules and operational security requirements. Professional development courses that translate military experience into civilian credentials without compromising classified information. These specialized services exist because elite warriors deserve advisors who understand their unique challenges. Generic solutions fail when the stakes involve national security and personal futures." Raven recognized it as another advertisement, this time for legal and educational services. Even in crisis, Arden was performing. It would probably be his last performance at J Soda. Within 48 hours, he'd be reassigned to a position where his technical knowledge could be utilized without giving him authority over people he'd proven he couldn't respect. The evening brought unexpected emotional weight. Students organized an impromptu gathering in the mess hall. Not a formal ceremony, just people wanting to acknowledge what had happened. Raven attended reluctantly, uncomfortable with attention after 3 months of invisibility. Lieutenant Henry Blake approached her with genuine humility. "Ma'am, I want to apologize for not doing more. I saw how they treated you, and I should have spoken up more forcefully." "You treated me with respect," Raven replied. "That's not nothing. In fact, it's everything. Character reveals itself in small moments when no one important is watching. You thought I was nobody, and you were still kind. That's the definition of integrity." Cadet Chloe Ryan was next, the female ranger candidate whose shooting Raven had quietly helped. "You showed me something I needed to see, that women don't need permission to be warriors. We just need to be ready and competent. Thank you." "You were always ready," Raven said. "You just needed to believe it." The gathering continued with students and instructors processing the day's revelations in their own ways. Some with embarrassment, some with newfound respect, some with the dawning realization that their own career trajectories had just been permanently altered based on how they had treated someone they had assumed was insignificant. Master Sergeant Abel Forrester found Raven near the end of the evening. The old Green Beret offered a simple nod of acknowledgement. "I knew," he said quietly, "couldn't place exactly what, but I knew you were operator, the way you moved, the way you thought. Old warriors recognize each other. You never said anything. Wasn't my place. You were running an op. I respected the mission." He paused. "For what it's worth, your evaluation was exactly what this place needed. We've been promoting technical competence over character for too long. Maybe this changes that. If that reveal just gave you chills, wait until you see what happens next. The consequences ripple further than you'd believe. Subscribe now because you'll want to see how this story ends. Justice is coming." The week following the revelation brought systematic consequences that rippled through JSOTA's institutional structure in ways both visible and hidden. Major Silas received orders reassigning him to an administrative position at Fort Benning. No combat leadership, no instructor roles, just desk work processing paperwork for officers with the character to actually lead. His protests went nowhere. The decision came from high enough in the command structure that appeals were pointless. Lieutenant Colonel Arden found himself relieved as Weapons Department head, transferred to a technical advisory position with no supervisory authority. His expertise would still be utilized, but he'd never again have power over junior personnel he'd proven he couldn't treat with basic respect. Captain Charlotte Blaine received a formal letter of counseling and mandatory assignment to mentor female special operations candidates. Her career would continue, but the black mark in her file would follow her through every promotion board. More importantly, she was required to have weekly sessions with Dr. Sarah Anderson to address her competitive hostility toward other women. Master Sergeant Liam Boyce faced reduction in rank, mandatory anger management counseling, and probation that would follow him for the rest of his career. His physical aggression toward Raven, now revealed as a SEAL operator conducting official Pentagon evaluation, was documented as assault on a superior conducting classified operations. Only the Admiral's intervention prevented court-martial. Colonel Carl Edwin, the deputy commandant who'd dismissed Raven as a SEAL groupie, received formal counseling and removal from all promotion board duties. His career ceiling was now fixed. He'd never make general. His assumptions about women in combat had been definitively proven wrong by someone who'd operated at levels he had only read about in classified briefings. But the most significant consequences were the quiet ones. 12 students and instructors flagged in Raven's evaluation found their security clearance applications mysteriously stalled. Future assignments to special operations units never materialized. Recommendations for advanced training got lost in bureaucratic delays. Their careers continued, but the doors to elite units quietly closed, locked by character assessments they'd never see. 2 weeks after the revelation, Commandant Hughes called an academy-wide assembly. Every student, instructor, and staff member, including support personnel who had watched the drama unfold, gathered in the main auditorium. "This institution teaches tactical excellence," Hughes began, her voice carrying command authority. "We train officers and senior enlisted to lead warriors in the most dangerous operations our nation conducts. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that technical competence without character is worse than useless. It's dangerous." She paused, letting the words settle over the assembled personnel. Petty Officer Cassian's evaluation revealed what we should have seen ourselves. that some of our most technically proficient personnel were failures as leaders, that we were promoting people who confused cruelty with strength, arrogance with confidence, and compliance with respect. Hughes gestured to new language projected on the screen behind her, updated evaluation criteria that would now include character assessment by support staff, anonymous feedback mechanisms, and red flags for officers who treated subordinates or support personnel with contempt. Effective immediately, all JSOTA evaluations will include input from personnel across all ranks and roles. Because if you can't treat a janitor with respect, you can't be trusted to lead warriors into combat. Leadership isn't about commanding people beneath you. It's about respecting everyone around you. The assembly ended with the announcement that Range 7, where much of Raven's observation work had occurred, would be renamed Cassian Range. A plaque would be installed with a quote Raven had provided: "Real warriors don't advertise, they serve." 3 weeks after the revelation, Raven stood in front of her first class as Senior Tactical Advisor, the civilian GS-14 position she'd accepted after initially planning to leave JSOTA entirely. Admiral Solomon had convinced her that teaching was another form of service, and maybe the most important one. 30 senior students sat before her, a mix of male and female officers and enlisted personnel from every special operations branch. They looked at her with respect that felt strange after 3 months of invisibility. "This course is Advanced Tactical Leadership," Raven began, her voice steady despite the discomfort of being visible again. "But we're not going to talk about tactics. We're going to talk about character. Because tactics are easy. Any competent soldier can learn to clear a room or call for fire, but having the character to lead people who volunteered to die for their country, that's hard." She clicked to the first slide, not a tactical diagram but a simple statement. How you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals who you actually are. For 3 months, I worked here as equipment technician. I cleaned your weapons, served your food, maintained your ranges. And I watched how you treated me when you thought I was nobody. Some of you were kind, some of you were dismissive, some of you were cruel. Your treatment of me had nothing to do with my competence or your tactical skills. It had everything to do with your character. Lieutenant Henry Blake sat in the front row, listening with the intensity of someone who understood he was receiving hard-won wisdom. "Character isn't what you do when your commanding officer is watching," Raven continued. "It's what you do when you're in a mess hall at 1900 hours and a tired woman serves you food. Do you make eye contact? Do you say thank you? Or do you treat her like furniture? Those small moments reveal more about your fitness to lead warriors than any tactical exercise ever will." The class continued with discussions about leadership under pressure, ethical decision-making in combat, and the particular responsibility of commanding people who'd volunteered for the most dangerous work their nation asked of its citizens. Raven drew on her 7 deployments, her time at DevGru, the operations she could discuss, and the ones she couldn't, building a curriculum around the principle that technical excellence without ethical foundation was a recipe for war crimes and destroyed lives. By the end of the first week, students were approaching her after class with questionings that had nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with becoming the kind of leaders who deserve to command warriors. 1 month after the revelation, JSOTA held a graduation ceremony for the Advanced Special Operations Leadership course, the same cycle Raven had been evaluating when her cover was blown. The students who'd dismissed her for 3 months now stood at attention as she was awarded the Distinguished Service to Special Operations Education Medal. She accepted it wearing dress blues for the first time in 3 years, her Navy Cross ribbon prominent among her decorations, no longer classified, revealed as part of the policy changes her evaluation had triggered. The standing ovation lasted a full minute, and even former antagonists like Silas and Arden stood and applauded. Though their faces carried the weight of permanent consequences they were still processing. Lieutenant Henry Blake graduated with honors and a note in his file about exceptional character and leadership potential. His future in naval special warfare was bright, largely because he'd treated a woman serving food with basic human decency when everyone around him had treated her as invisible. Cadet Chloe Ryan graduated as the top student in the Small Arms Qualification course, her confidence transformed by understanding that competence earned respect regardless of gender. She approached Raven after the ceremony with a simple statement: "I'm going to be what you showed me was possible." The weeks that followed brought a routine that felt almost normal: teaching, mentoring, occasional consultations with Pentagon officials about character evaluation methodologies that might be applied across other military training institutions. Raven found herself settling into a life that had purpose without requiring her to hide who she was. Dr. Sarah Anderson provided weekly counseling sessions that helped Raven process the trauma of extended undercover work layered on top of existing PTSD from combat operations. They talked about identity, about the cost of service, about learning to exist in peacetime after years of operating at the edge of human capability. "You punished yourself with this evaluation mission," Sarah said during one session, her insight cutting through Raven's defenses. "You couldn't carry the weight of combat anymore, so you volunteered for a different kind of hell, hiding everything you are, accepting abuse from people who had no idea what you'd sacrificed. That's not recovery, that's self-flagellation." "Maybe I needed it," Raven replied quietly. "After Yemen, after losing 4 teammates and being the one who survived, maybe I needed to prove I could still serve, even if it meant serving in ways no one would recognize. And now? Now I teach. Help people become better leaders. Try to ensure the next generation values character as much as technical competence. It's not combat, but it matters." "It matters enormously," Sarah confirmed. "You're shaping people who will make life and death decisions about other humans. That's sacred work." 3 months after the revelation, 6 months total since Raven had arrived at J Soda, she stood at Arlington National Cemetery in front of a memorial for her 4 teammates lost in Yemen. The names were carved in granite, their service dates ending too soon, their potential unfulfilled. "I'm trying to make it mean something," she whispered to the stone. "Your sacrifice, my survival, all of it. I'm teaching people to be worthy of leading warriors like you. I don't know if that's enough, but it's what I have to give." The November wind carried her words away, and she stood in silence for long minutes before heading back to her car. Her phone rang as she reached the parking lot. Unknown number, but the area code was Virginia, probably J Soda related. "This is Cassian." "Petty Officer Cassian, this is JASOC Commanding General Ramirez." Raven straightened instinctively, her body responding to command authority even through a phone line. "Yes, sir. I've been reviewing your evaluation work at J Soda and the subsequent impact on institutional character assessment. Outstanding work. Which brings me to why I'm calling. We have a situation that requires your specific expertise." "Sir, I'm retired from operational duty. I'm aware. This isn't a combat deployment. It's an evaluation. Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado. They're running the first official female BUDS integration class. 23 women candidates. 0 female instructors with SEAL experience to advise the program." Raven felt her heart rate increase. BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. The crucible that had nearly destroyed her physically and mentally before forging her into an operator capable of breaching bin Laden's compound. The place where she'd proven that gender was irrelevant to capability, that women could meet the same standards men did, that the only thing that mattered was performance. "Sir, I left that world for good reasons. PTSD, survivor's guilt, the cost of service was too high. I know. I've read your medical files, but these women candidates need someone who walked the path, someone who survived not just BUDS, but everything that came after, the deployments, the combat, the impossible standards, the constant requirement to prove yourself. They don't need someone to hold their hands. They need someone who can show them it's survivable." Raven closed her eyes, seeing herself at 24 years old in freezing Pacific surf during Hell Week, every muscle screaming, instructors yelling that she didn't belong, that women couldn't hack it, that she should quit and save everyone the embarrassment. She'd proven them wrong through sheer stubborn refusal to fail. These 23 women were living that same experience, facing the same doubt, fighting the same battles she'd fought a decade ago. "Sir, I'm teaching at J Soda. We've coordinated with Commandant Hughes. She'll release you for temporary assignment. 90 days in Coronado advising the integration program. You won't be an instructor. You'll be an advisor and mentor, someone the candidates can talk to who understands exactly what they're experiencing. Sir, with respect, going back to Coronado, that's where this all started for me, where I became a SEAL. I don't know if I can handle the memories." General Ramirez's voice softened slightly. "Petty Officer, I'm going to tell you what someone should have told me after my last deployment. Service takes many forms. You served in combat for 7 years. You served undercover at J Soda for 3 months. Now I'm asking you to serve by helping 23 women prove that capability knows no gender. That's not a step backward. That's a step forward into a different kind of mission, one that might save more lives than any tactical operation you ever executed. Raven opened her eyes, looking across Arlington toward the Pentagon in the distance, toward the memorial for her fallen teammates behind her, toward the life she'd built teaching at J Sota, toward the woman she'd been and the person she was trying to become. When do I report, sir? January 4th. You'll have 3 weeks to wrap up at J Soda and prepare. We're calling the assignment Legacy Program, connecting proven operators with the next generation. Your official title will be Senior Advisor for Integration Support. Understood, sir. And Petty Officer, thank you for all of it. The combat service, the evaluation work, and especially for being willing to go back to the place that both made you and broke you. That takes a kind of courage different from anything you showed in combat. The call ended. Raven stood in the parking lot as dusk settled over Arlington, the weight of this new mission settling onto shoulders that had carried so much already. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Iris. Need you to pull my Buds files. Going back to Coronado. Tell Pentagon I need full psychological support and extraction protocols if this goes sideways. Iris's response came immediately. Are you sure about this? Raven looked at her reflection in the car window. 28 years old with eyes that had seen too much, but still held the capacity for hope. Still held the belief that service mattered. Still held the stubborn conviction that the hard right path was better than the easy wrong one. She typed, "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Because that's what operators did. They accepted missions that terrified them. They walked into spaces that held their worst memories. They chose service over comfort, purpose over peace, impact over ease. She'd been a warrior in Abbottabad, an evaluator at J Sota. Now she'd be a mentor in Coronado, helping 23 women prove what she'd proven years ago. That gender was irrelevant. That standards were standards. That the only thing that separated those who made it from those who didn't was the willingness to endure what others couldn't. Raven climbed into her car and drove away from Arlington as the last light faded from the sky. Behind her, the memorial stone stood witness to sacrifice. Ahead, Coronado waited with its own challenges and demons to face. She'd spent 3 months being nobody, 6 months rebuilding her sense of purpose. Now she'd spend 90 days helping ensure the next generation of warriors learned that real strength came from respecting everyone around you, from the 4-star Admiral to the woman serving food in the mess hall. Because in the end, that was the lesson that mattered most. Not how to clear a room or call for fire, but how to treat people with dignity regardless of their rank, role, or recognition. Real warriors didn't advertise, they served, and service took many forms. Raven Cassian had finally figured out what form hers would take next, not in combat, not undercover, but in the honest work of mentoring those who came after, ensuring they learned not just tactics but character. The phone call had changed everything, and as Coronado waited in her future, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this time the service wouldn't break her. This time, it might actually heal her. One mission at a time, one day at a time, one student learning to respect everyone around them. That was enough. It had to be. The warrior drove into the night, heading toward whatever came next with the same stubborn courage that had carried her through Hell Week, through Abbottabad, through Syria and Yemen, and 3 months of invisible evaluation at J Soda. Some battles were fought with weapons, others were fought with patience and teaching and the quiet determination to make the world better than you found it. Raven Cassian was ready for this battle, finally.